All right, everybody, welcome to today's episode of We As Start Talking. I am Gareth, one of your hosts, and today I'm pretty excited. Have an amazing guest on the show. Before we jump into it, just going to do a little bit of housekeeping. First of all, please head over if you can, support us on our brand new Patreon account, patreon.com/start talking. This is our new kind of venture for us, but we're just looking to support the We As community, get some exclusive content, some wicked merchandise, which this isn't a video version of the podcast, but I'm wearing a t-shirt and I have a mug here, which I know you will appreciate. Some coffee in it. So yeah, head on over, give us a little bit of a support to build our community and build our conversations. And also, as always, you can check us out on social media. We As Start Talking, and also over on our website to find out everything we're up to. Now we are going to jump straight into the episode. Today I have Jordan Syatt on the show. Jordan, how are you today?
I'm good, man. How are you?
Yeah, man, I'm really good. I'm pumped to get this conversation rolling. So I want to give you a little bit of an intro before and then dive into some of the questions that have been in my brain after following you and, liking, some of my favorite posts that you've put out on social media. So I think for a lot of the listeners, predominantly you have a big following on social media. You do a lot of your, should we say, business, quote unquote, via not only in person, but also online as a fitness trainer. And you have a pretty awesome background right back to kind of, like a mid-teenager with, nutrition and weightlifting. And that kind of followed you through to, being a world record powerlifter, taking a whole heap of strength and conditioning certifications, working in that. And then obviously, alongside that, you worked a lot with Gary Vaynerchuk as his personal trainer. And I know you've got a great story around kind of traveling with him and, being that kind of hands-on deck person for nutrition and fitness. And I know that the listeners are going to love to hear about that, I guess, the impact and the mindset that you're exposed to in that world, as well as kind of how you manage that from a business standpoint. So I'd love that was a very brief intro and a bit of information. I'd love you to share a little bit more about who Jordan is and what you're up to.
Yeah, sure. Well, man, thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it. I guess I'll give a little background in regard to how I got started in the fitness industry. The reason I got started so young is because of wrestling. So I started wrestling when I was 8 years old, and my mom, I remember vividly. My mom walked into the living room where my brother and I were. My brother's about 3 years older than me. I was 8, and she was like, "All right, I want you guys to start wrestling." And at that age, in that point of my life, the only wrestling that I knew was like WWE style, like hitting people with furniture. So I remember I asked my mom, I was lying on the couch, and you have those moments in life, these like little moments that you'll just never forget forever. Like when you're 90 years old, you'll remember it. I remember I asked her, I said, "You want me to hit someone with a chair?" And the look of just overwhelming surprise in her face that I could ask such a stupid question is just ingrained in my memory. She was like, "No, you idiot, it's Olympic style wrestling." And I started doing it and I fell in love with it. And it's just been ever since I was 8 years old. It was a huge part of my life. And when I went to high school, I made varsity as a freshman. So I beat a junior out for the varsity spot. But I had to cut a lot of weight. So I was cutting from 112 pounds to 103 pounds. I'm not sure what that is in kilograms, but I was small kid, but I had to cut a lot of weight. And I had no idea what to do, number one. And number two is I was good at wrestling from a technique perspective and an endurance perspective. But because I was 14 years old, on varsity, I was going up against mostly kids who were 16, 17, 18, and the strength differential was gargantuan. So I ended up emailing a gym that was a couple towns over from where I lived, and I was like, "Hey, listen, I'll take the trash out, I'll clean the floors, let me just come learn from you." And fortunately, they took me under their wing, and I worked in that gym all through high school. And that's when I really became obsessed with working out and nutrition. And that's where I spent all of my free time, was at that gym and learning there. So that's how I started coaching people.
Yeah, that's awesome. And the first thing, a couple of things to pull out from that. First of all, the foresight and the work ethic behind that approach is a big takeaway for lots of listeners, for me as well. And, I have this conversation a lot on the show, is having that having the foresight to say, hey, if I can, I can't go into this gym, and maybe, there's not the resources to go join that gym at 14. Maybe you're not in it. I don't know that if that's your situation, but for a lot of people, that might be a barrier. But
Yeah,
you just,
absolutely.
yeah, right. And you just went in and said, hey, let me take, like, who doesn't want a little bit of free labor and just have this kid kick around the gym? And, we all in the industry, it's about serving and it's about helping others. So as trainers, we love to have that, we love to have a kid in there to take under our wing and help along the journey. So, I think that's a good message to anyone listening, thinking about it. If you are 15, but even if you're looking at it as a different career and maybe moving into that in the future as well. So I think that's an important message.
For whatever it's worth, I can ramble for hours, so I tried to make the story a little bit more brief. But for whatever it's worth, when I applied to another gym first, another gym that was in my town, and that gym, they said they didn't want a high school kid hanging around their clients. And so I remember I went in for an interview and they said, nope, like not going to work. We don't want a high school kid hanging around our clients. And I was so disappointed that I walked home, and it was several miles. It was a long walk. And I showed up back at my house. I walked in through the garage, and my mom was like, what's wrong? I was clearly really upset. And I was like, they didn't want me. And that was the first time I'd ever been denied a job. I was 14 years old. I didn't have that much experience, but I was just so shocked that I didn't get it, that I was super upset and I didn't know what to do. And I remember just walking past my mom. There was a brief pause. Then she was like, well, now what? And I remember being like, what do you mean now what? Like, I'm going to go downstairs and watch TV and be really upset about this. And she was like, no, you're just getting like, that's it. You're not going to apply to another gym. And I remember in that moment being like, that was a huge light bulb moment for me, being like, I could try again. I could go to another gym, right? And so that's why I went to a gym a couple towns over for me. And it turned out to be an incredible experience. And they took me under their wing, and they were very science-based. And looking back, I'm lucky that the first gym said no, because the second gym was actually way better. But for anyone out there, whether you're 15 or whether you're 50, and you might want to get in the industry, I know a lot of people, especially as they get older, they're not really a fan of doing things for free. They feel like they shouldn't be interning for free. So much of my career has been built on doing things for free. I still do things for free every day. In the last 18 hours, I've given away hundreds of dollars worth of free memberships to my inner circle just on my social media, because I see people doing things I like. If you are resistant to doing things for free, you're probably never going to get anywhere, especially in this industry, because this industry, the backbone of it is built on doing things initially for free.
Yeah, for sure. And I think it also crosses over to, the world of fitness. That's such a true, I think about the years of just getting out there and giving out free fitness advice on the gym floor back in, 20 odd years ago when I started. It's the same thing. Like, you just hours just crawling the gym floor, talking to people, not getting paid for it.
Yep.
And doing it right. And I think sometimes that's missed a lot in the newer era of the fitness industry. And I love to educate trainers on that. And like, you have to spend time, like you have to build rapport and get to know people. And sometimes you have to do that for free. The other point was it crosses over to the world of podcasting. Because we're putting out great content, we're finding amazing guests, and yes, this is a journey for us as podcasters, but and having our guests on and sharing those experiences. But it's also, again, you're putting stuff out there for free, but you never know the doors and the opportunities it's going to open up from that, which, timing's everything. So sometimes things land. And I think to your story with the gym as well, timing's everything, right? Sometimes,
100%.
yeah. And it kind of, for me also, it echoes the point that, sometimes we have to learn to thrive under failure as well, right? If we fail at things and we can give up, or, like your mum, and it sounds like she's a great influence on you, you get up and you go again.
For me, it's so cliche, and I see so many people talking about it now, is like the importance of failure. And I hate cliche sayings, but it's very true. It's so unbelievably true. I think one of the best parts about failing is you have an opportunity to try again. The issue is that people look at failure as the ending point instead of the starting point. It's like when you look at failure as the ending point, then you failed. Like that is it. It's over. But when you look at failure as just another bump in the road, as another opportunity to start, you'll never fail, because you're never quitting.
Yeah. Yeah, so true. And I think as well, like when we talk about goal setting, and I'm sure we'll dig into this more, but we always talk about the moving target, right? Because people always come to you, I've got this goal. It's absolute. It's very black and white. And, my biggest thing as a coach and when motivationally interviewing people is to bring them back into the gray and say your goal's a moving target, because if you're so black and white with success and failure, where's the space to live, and where's the space to grow, and where's the space to find those new things, right? Like we set a goal, and how often do our clients then 6 months into it, the goal's completely changed,
Yep. Yep.
right?
100%.
So with, obviously we heard a little bit about that kind of start in the industry, and I know that kind of a few years after that you'd already got going with kind of running boot camps and small group training and personal training, and and at a very young age, like still as a teenager, something I always struggled, because I started at 17 as well, walking the gym floor and a lot of young trainers out there. How did you deal with, or did you have to deal with the, I guess, a little bit of a kind of imposter syndrome, but also, kind of internally for us, but also there's the people out there that maybe don't look at us as an expert because we're young and we don't necessarily know a lot. Is that something you came up against?
Oh yeah. I came up against a lot of that from other coaches. So I got a lot of kickback very early on from other coaches, first starting in person and then online, when I started making content online, from people being like, what are you doing? You're 21 years old, you're 22 years old. Like, why do you think you have the right to make content? I got a lot of kickback. The funny thing about that was, as I look back, is I was making good content, and they felt threatened. They felt threatened that I was making content that was getting traction, and they were like, you don't have as much experience as I do, so why should you be doing this? And very fortunately, for whatever reason, I'm very stubborn and hard-headed, and when people would kick back on me, it just motivated me to do it more. Right. So I get sort of like that little "I'll show you" type of mentality, which is a blessing. I'm very lucky that that happened, because if I didn't have that, if I was someone else, I might have been like, okay, you know what? I'm going to stop making content. I don't want to step on anyone's toes. And to give credit where it's due, I think a lot of that has to do with my mom, just the way that I was raised. Just like, you don't back down when people try to bully you. You just don't. It's just what I was always brought up with. And I think wrestling instilled that within me. My mom instilled that within me. And I think that one of the things that I think I'm proud that I did is I was very clear, especially in my content now, as I was back then. I was like, listen, I don't know everything. I don't have all the answers. So one of the things they would do is they'd be like, well, like, what gives you the right to make this content? And my answer would always be, I'm just making content to help people. I'm not saying that this is the only way. I'm not even saying this is necessarily the right way. I'm not saying that this is, in 10 years, I'm going to look back and agree with what I'm saying now. All I'm doing is that in this moment, I think this is going to help people. So I'm going to put it out there for free. And if you don't like that, that's okay. You don't have to like it, but I'm going to keep doing it. And I think that's what allowed me to keep going. I think one of the reasons people struggle with imposter syndrome is because, especially coaches, they feel like they're not able to say they don't know, right? That they're afraid to say, I don't know, I don't have the answer, I'm not sure. So when they're afraid to say that, they take on this expert role. They like put on this facade of being an all-knowing expert, which of course you're not. You're a human being. Like, you don't have all the answers, and you very well could be wrong. God forbid, you're a human, you're wrong once in your life. So I think the more you can understand that you very well might be wrong, and the less you take on the expert role, and the more you just take on the role of trying to help people with the knowledge that you have, the less likely you're going to be negatively affected by imposter syndrome.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, and it's easy to reflect back on, long careers that we have. But, you look back at it, and I just think about the horrendous things that I believed, thought was correct, that put out there and coach people on that stuff. And you just have to look back. You look back and laugh on it now. But for new aspiring people in any industry and job, is like, that's going to happen. You're going to fuck things up. Like and it's going to be okay, because those people, as long as it's not killing anybody. So, but other than that, these people are okay, and a lot of them are still, in my circle. So it's going to happen, right? It's so important. And I think a great point that you made, and this is something that Carl, one of our other hosts at We As Start Talking, talks about a lot, and one of his big kind of phrases is that spite's a good thing. And I think you kind of alluded to that a little, right? Like, sometimes we have to have spite in a healthy way, is to say, no, I'm just going to keep going. I'm going to plow through. I'm going to make a big difference, regardless of who's kind of against me. And like you said, people aren't going to like it, and that's okay. And it actually makes me think, and this is something that I talk a lot about in the, I think the fitness industry, but I was speaking actually with with Jordan Shallow last week. So shout out to Jordan. He was on the show and we were talking about the industry, and I kind of touched on how the industry is very much, I see it as about 10% fact and about 90% opinion. And right, because it's the same thing. You get asked the same questions, and I know you get this as well, and I've seen it on your social posts. But people are always like, well, what's new? What's new in nutrition, and what's new in it? And I'm like, nothing's new. Like, there's 3 macronutrients. Drink some water. It push, pull, squat, lunge, twist. Yep. Like, it's the same shit we've been doing for years. It's 10% fact, and then it's 90% opinion. And like you explained it, and that just resonates a lot with me. Is we're all going to find a different path to get you there, and everyone has their own ideas around that, and that's okay. We're not all going to align with it. And I think it crosses over to life. And the kind of question I posed on a few shows recently was, maybe life's a little like that and we need to see it a bit more. And I think we'd then be braver to go out there and do the things we want to do. If the world is like 10% of not so much facts, but 10% of like the law and your morals, and then 90% of go do some shit you want to do and stop overthinking it. Because really, that 10%, like, you're staying within your morals, don't kill anyone, don't do anything illegal, don't go to prison, go fucking live your life. And I just wondered, if does that kind of align with the way you see things for the industry and for life? I guess a 2-part question.
Yeah. So there's a couple of things here. Number one is just, as soon as you said it, a light bulb went off, and the 10% facts, for whatever reason, the one thing I keep thinking is like, man, that'd be a great name for a podcast or a book. Like, 10% facts is the title of the show, right? Like, man, I think that would crush. So I had to get that off my mind, because I feel like that'd be really good. The other thing I'm thinking, as you were talking about that and how that relates to life, I love philosophy, and I love looking into different religions. Like, I'm Jewish, but I like studying Christianity. I like studying Islam. I want to learn more about Baha'i and Buddhism. I think there's a lot to be learned from looking at other religions and texts and reading old scriptures from thousands and thousands of years ago. And one thing that never ceases to amaze me is the lessons that they learned thousands and thousands and thousands of years ago, in a time that is completely and utterly nothing like what it is today. Those lessons still hold true, right? The lessons that people learned thousands and thousands of years ago, whether it's your morals, your virtues, your ethics, your thoughts, your fears, your anxieties, concerns, everything that you could possibly think and feel has already been thought and felt by everybody else. Every worry and fear and concern and anxiety you have has already been had by other people. It's been articulated by people. It's been worked through by other people. And I think that's like the 10%, right? That's the 10%. But then the 90% is how we experience it, like in our actual life. So thousands of years ago, they didn't experience it on social media. They might have experienced it, I don't know, on the farm, or they experienced it wherever they were, right? In the gladiator stadium, right? Like, fighting for their life. You know what I mean? All of the things that you go through, people have gone through in their own way. So that's what I was thinking about as you were talking about that.
Yeah, and it's the shared experience too, because we do experience everything differently, and that resonates with me a lot too, right? Like, it's nothing new, and there might be, we talk a lot on our programs, on our channel, and we're actually on, we did a TV segment actually earlier on today. We were talking about how it kind of felt like they were asking questions like, this is a new thing, like, and we were kind of dialing a little bit on men's mental health coming off the back of Movember. I was like, this is not a new thing. Like, people have been experiencing this. The biggest problem, I think, with men specifically, to your point, is that we're not sharing those experiences. So it feels like a new thing to people. I'm like, nope, it's not. It's just, we have this, I don't know if it's a systematic sociological like issue where we're not sharing those experiences. And for me, like, from a mental health side, like, that's been a big issue for me in my life. And a lot of people that are listening will resonate with them for sure, especially the men, is that we don't share those experiences, and then it negatively affects us. As soon as we are able to surround ourselves with people that are kind of allowing us to be vulnerable and share that stuff, but also that we're able to be vulnerable enough to hear it and sit in it,
Yep.
suddenly, like, your world changes. And that's been a big experience for me with this podcast channel, and my Scott and Carla are the other hosts of the show, and kind of sharing those experiences. Do you find that, is that something that is important to you? And do you have that little kind of circle, that close knit people that you can be vulnerable and go through those experiences with?
Yeah, I have a couple people in my life that I can be very just completely brutally open and honest with. One of whom is my therapist. And I think that's something that over the last 6 months I've been speaking a lot more about is therapy and how not only how important I think it is, but actually sharing my experiences of going through therapy. I think one of the things that has been unique for me is building a social media audience. The the process of being as honest as I possibly can with them has been both scary but also helpful for me, right? Whereas like it's one thing to tell one person, it's another thing to tell 500,000 people, right? So it's like, that being said, about, I don't know, a year ago, maybe a little over a year ago, I started having a lot of anxiety, and it's specifically pertaining to social media. And I had never experienced that before. Like I had always just loved social media. It was something that I was very passionate about. I loved the interaction. Obviously, there were some negative experiences, but the overall totality of social media, I was just obsessed with it and passionate about it. And over a little over a year ago, I started to get a lot of anxiety with it. And I realized there were many reasons for that, but one of the reasons is I didn't feel like I could be myself. I didn't feel like I could actually be who I was and say what I believed and what I thought without getting attacked. And I think that's one of the things that happens as you grow an audience. I mean, you could have 50 followers and get attacked by someone for saying what you believe, right?
Yeah.
So never mind hundreds and hundreds of thousands. Like you can really feel like you're getting bombarded with other people. And through therapy and through working with therapy and through trying to improve myself, I realized that the more fearful I got of sharing myself, it was almost like a perpetual cycle where the more fearful I became to share myself, the less I shared of myself, and the more fearful I became as a result of it. Right. Or it's like the more fearful I got, the less I did. And then the fear compounded. Whereas the more I started to actually share and face that fear and actually share about who I was, the less fearful I became of it, because I saw the reactions. Yes, there were some negative ones, but the feeling of actually being honest about who I am and what I believe was way more impactful than the negative reactions that happened as a result of it. And so as a result, I'm not going to say I don't get any anxiety with social media anymore, but relative to where it was probably 6 months ago before I started therapy, it's completely different. So yeah, being able to be open and honest, whether it's with one person or 50 people or everyone who follows you, whatever it is, I think that is tremendously, tremendously important.
Yeah, I love that you brought that up, and that's something. And actually, funny enough, um, kind of aligns with me a little bit, and it's something that I've been sharing probably on our episodes this year for sure, about a kind of journey through therapy as well, and kind of talking through those things. And interestingly enough, my a lot of my mental health issues are around anxiety, and it's similar to yours, not so much with social media, but very much about kind of the fear of showing up as yourself, and then that kind of like I guess like leadership kind of hierarchies and how people kind of see you within an organization, and or within
Mm,
social media or whatever it is. So it's very similar, and I think that's so important. That and just this is unique in that right now we're recording a podcast with two men that are openly talking about going to therapy. Like that, it might not be a new thing, but it's a new thing that's out there in the world to thousands of people.
yeah.
So just that's powerful alone, for people to hear and understand that you can do it and you don't have to hide it,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah.
Some people might have an issue with it, but who cares? Like at the end of the day, like then fuck off and don't listen and don't watch. Like unsubscribe, don't listen to the podcast, don't look on social media. Like if you don't like what you're hearing, that's fine. You can walk away. However, the impact that, and I'm sure that, and I've seen a few of those posts recently of yours, and just that alone I know would have helped so many people just to hear that, hey, you know what? It's not just me. Someone else has
Yeah.
been through this, right? And I think that's such an important for everyone to take away. If you take nothing else away from this episode, which I'm sure you will, take that away, because that's huge, and I think it's so important. A couple of other things on one thing that I think is super important, and one thing that interests me. So I'm going to be totally selfish and ask what interests me first. So when you kind of develop that anxiety, this is something that probably, if I'm honest, has probably been like a 5-10 year thing for me that I've really been aware of. However, I only really owned it about a year ago. how, and this, I've discussed this with a few other people in my circle, that men specifically that have been to kind of therapy or have had anxiety. How does it physically affect you, if you're happy to share? Because this
Yeah.
really intrigues me.
Um, Anxiety for me, in terms of how I feel physically, it's in my chest and my stomach. It's like I feel it, like tightness, chest tightness, stomach, and like a lot of tightness in my chest. It gets a little bit hard to breathe. Very difficult for me to think. It's very. What happens when I start getting anxiety about something? And my therapist calls it catastrophizing. So basically, what'll happen is something will happen. Either I'll do something or something will happen, and then I'll look at that one thing. It is literally all I can think about or focus on, regardless of the conversation I'm having, who I'm with, where I am, doesn't matter. That's literally the only thing that's going on in my brain. And what's happening is I'm thinking of the possible sequence of events that could lead to the biggest possible catastrophe as a result of it. And it's funny because in my head, it all makes sense when I'm just thinking about it. As I'm thinking about it, I'm like, oh yeah, like I'm definitely going to lose my entire business. My family's going to hate me. My fiance is going to leave me. Like I'm going to get sick. Like literally in my head, as I'm catastrophizing, it all makes sense. But once I verbalize it, it's like, that's insane. The likelihood of that happening is so outrageously small that, number one, even if it did happen, even if it was that worst come to worst case scenario, I'd be okay. I'd find a way to figure it all out. That's number one. Number two is that is so unlikely to happen in that ridiculous sequence of events. Like, get over yourself. So for me, that's sort of how it builds up, is something small will happen and then it will be all I can think about or focus on, and I'll catastrophize into a series of events that makes it into this, like, the worst possible scenario.
It's like I feel like it's the therapy go to catastrophize, because I hear that a lot too. Um, I think we're like we're living alignment right now, because that's very much me as well. And I remember the first time I really spoke about it, and the response was this. And I never really had to dig a lot more into it, because the therapist said to me, so what? So what if that happens? Like, what's the worst that's going to happen? And I sat there literally in silence for what felt like about 12 minutes, probably about 12 seconds. And I was like, and I explained a few scenarios, and I was like, yeah, you're right. What, like, really, who cares? And what's the worst that can happen? And that just, it was literally that one thing. And yeah, I've struggled with it still. And, you know, it's a journey, right? But it just, that alone made a massive difference to the way I focus on things. And it's interesting because the reason why I asked as well physically is because a good friend of mine, we had a conversation, and he was referring to it being like almost like waking up in the night sometimes and feeling like this like an elephant sitting on his chest, like he couldn't breathe, and that was his experience. For me, I've never really had that from a breathing standpoint, but for me, it's all stomach. So it's so interesting how those things affect us. Like I struggle to eat. I feel hungry, and then when I eat, I feel like I want to throw up, and then
Yep.
like, and there's all this, like, you know, acid reflux and all these things that are linked to it, and I know that they're stress related and they're based on anxiety, and I get the whole focus thing too, and I think that's important for people too, because I think we beat up on ourselves because we're unable to focus on things or action on tasks when we're in that state. And I think we just have to accept that no matter how hard you try and think about other things, or you try and focus on a work project, it's not going to happen. Like, your mind is in that, and until you move past it, you're done. Like, you might as well just get up, like, close your laptop, get up, go for a walk, like, do something else, because you're not going to figure that out in the moment, right? And I think that's so important for people to hear. And I really appreciate, like, I'm so grateful that you are willing to share that and
Yeah.
kind of give your insight, because it's so needed. We all need to hear that. It's so important.
It's
So,
also made me significantly more empathetic to people that I don't know, and people I do know, but especially that I don't know. Where, for example, I live in New York City, and I'll walk down the street, and I try and, like, if I make eye contact with someone, I'm going to try and smile and say, like, hey, good morning, have a good day, whatever it is. Earlier in my life, if I smiled or said hello and, like, they didn't reciprocate, in my head, I'd be like, fucking asshole, right? Like, that'd be my first response. But as I've gone through this, and you never know what's going on in someone's head. Like, someone might walk by, maybe they literally just don't notice you, or maybe they're having a panic attack, or maybe they're having, like, severe anxiety, and all they can think about is that one thing, and they might have seen you, and it wasn't in their ability at that point in time to smile at you. God forbid, they just weren't in that frame of mind to do it. So as I've gone through it myself, and as I've noticed how it affects me, I've been able to relate to other people and be more understanding of, maybe I don't know what someone else is going through. And so rather than just judging them based on how they look or whatever it is, I can be like, you know what, it's completely fine. Maybe they're going through something. Keep going on.
Yeah, and I think that resonates. And I mean this in the most, kind of empathetic way, but it's about them. It's not about you. Like, you just have
Yep.
to walk past it, right? Because whatever they're whether it's an issue they have and whether it's something against you or whatever it might be, or it's their own thing going on, doesn't matter. Like, don't let that. We have to walk past that, right, and kind of step away from it. I think it's interesting that you touched on a little bit the kind of, sharing on social media and kind of showing up as yourself, and how I think this relates a lot to kind of habits and lifestyle and fitness and, things that we're both absorbed in all day, every day. Is the one thing I picked up was your ability to, or the process, in taking action, to post more about those things. And this is where I think people struggle. And if my mind serves it correctly, you made a great video about this some time ago, where people are looking for kind of motivation in their life to be able to take action. And the thing that you shared is to move past that anxiety and that fear. You're not suddenly going to wake up and go, today's the day, I have no fear, and I'm just going to, seriously, people, it's not going to happen. Like, stop waiting for it. Like, you need to take action. And that's what you did. You took action. You got some help, which is great. And then you took action on those things, and that resulted in you doing a better job, removing the fear from it, moving forward, staying in the right trajectory, all those things we have to do when it comes to goals, motivation. So I wonder if apologies because I can't remember the exact content of the video, but I know it's linked to that subject. I wonder if you just share in a bit more detail with your kind of approach around that, around action taking and motivation.
Yeah. I mean, so you explained it very well. There are two different loops. One loop is correct and one loop is incorrect. The loop that's correct, I call it Dumbledore's loop, right? The loop that's incorrect, I haven't come up with a name for it, but we could call it Voldemort's loop, right? So what most people think, how they imagine motivation to work, because this is literally the most common question I get. The single most common question I get is, how do I get motivated? I'm just not motivated. What do I do to get motivated? Above all else, that is the most common one. The next one is probably something like, how do I get rid of belly fat? But either way, motivation is number one. And generally speaking, I've found people think that they're just going to get motivated. Right. They're literally, in order for me to get a message on Instagram from someone saying that they're asking, how do I get motivated? They have to probably be sitting down, right, on their couch, maybe lying down in their bed, scrolling through Instagram, going through my stories, maybe on my page, maybe, who knows, they see something come up and they decide, while they're sitting down, lying down, whatever, I'm going to ask this guy, how do I get motivated to work out? Because I'm just not motivated to work out as I'm lying here comfortable under my covers on my couch, watching TV, whatever it is. And they think that somehow, some way, they're just going to get motivated. And from that motivation, they'll take action. And then from those actions, they'll get results. And then from those results, they get more motivation. That is Voldemort's loop. That's the incorrect way to think of motivation. It's not accurate. And there's a lot of science and research to back this up. Dumbledore's loop, the truth about how motivation actually works, is first you have to take action. You have to do the thing that you are not motivated to do. So for example, if you're lying on your couch or in your bed and you're about to message someone, well, how do I get motivated? What you actually have to do is get the fuck up and do something. Which is the usual response to that is, yeah, well, it's easier said than done. Yeah, it is easier said than done, but so is literally fucking everything. Everything is easier said than done. Literally everything. It would be way easier for us to say, hey, you know what? We should do a podcast one time, but then to actually schedule the podcast, get on the podcast and do the podcast, it's way easier to say it than actually do it. So sure, you're right. It's easier said than done, but does that mean you shouldn't do it at all? Of course not. So first you have to do the thing you don't want to do. Then from that action, you'll get results. And then from those results, you'll get more motivated to take more action. But the first step is action. The first step is not motivation. And from here, this is where so much of my coaching methodology stems from, is This is why so many of the things I recommend are seemingly insignificant, seemingly so simple and basic, and they're as if they wouldn't do anything. Like a lot of people ask, well, what should I do? Go on a walk, go on a 5-minute walk. They're like, that's it? That's what you want me to do? I'm like, that's literally it. Go on a 5-minute walk. They're like, why? I'll tell you when you're done. They do the 5-minute walk. They're like, okay, like, why do you make me do the 5-minute walk? They're like, well, because once you did the walk, now you're probably going to want to do more. Now you're up. Now you believe in your ability to succeed. You did the 5-minute walk. Now you're already up. You probably feel better just because your endorphins are up a little bit. Maybe you want to go on a 10-minute walk. Maybe it ends up being a 30-minute walk. Maybe then from there, you decide to do a few push-ups. Well, cool. Now you took action on the thing you didn't want to do at all. And you're probably doing more than you thought you were going to anyway. So that's why so much of my coaching methodology breaks things down into seemingly insignificant habits that actually add up a lot over the long term.
Yeah, it makes me think about a post that I love. And I'm referring a lot to social media posts because Jordan and I, for the listeners, have connected through social media. So this is where kind of I've picked up a lot of things that I love. I love the 1-2-3 method is probably one of my favorite videos. I was like, eat one fucking salad, 2 bits of fruit, and 3 bottles of water, and stop overcomplicating it.
That's it.
It's the best. Everyone needs to watch that video. So go find it. Not only is it hilarious, but it's great.
I got so many messages about that. And like literally in the last 2 weeks, I've had people messaging me, hey, I've lost 4 pounds since I started the 1-2-3 method. Hey, I lost 6 pounds. It's like all it is 1 salad a day, 2 pieces of fruit, 3 bottles of water. I don't give a fuck what size your bottle of water is. I don't care if it's 64 ounces or 18 ounces. It doesn't fucking matter. It's just the habit of doing all of that stuff. If you can do 1, 2, 3 every day, you're on a great path.
Yeah, stop overcomplicating everything is the general message I live by in coaching. I'm like, as soon as someone asks me a question, I'm like, you're overcomplicating it. Like, come back to me when you're drinking, like you said, 3 bottles of water and you're walking 10,000 steps and you're sleeping. Like, come back to me and then we'll have a conversation. Don't be talking to me about what supplements you're going to take and what, you need a testosterone this or you need a growth hormone that. I'm like, no, you don't. You need to go to sleep is what you need to do. Like, it's so important, and it's simplifying stuff for. And this is where I think you win so much on social media with your content is that it's digestible. Pardon the pun, we're talking about food, but it's digestible for everybody because and if people can hook into that and understand that, and it's the constant message. This is something that I get asked a lot is people are like, don't you get bored after 20 years of telling people the same thing? I'm like, no, I don't, because I know that it will sink in eventually. And I feel like that's kind of your approach and the simplification of the complexity that can be out there. The 90% of the fitness industry is complex, and we can make it so complex. And don't get me wrong, there's a time and a place for that, and there's a certain person for that too. However, we need to digest stuff at the level in which it needs to be, consumed, right? They need to be able to digest it, and it's that simple stuff that just makes such a difference. I guess the question I'm kind of leading to is how do you get past the complexity and get the content out there so it is consumed so readily? Like, and I know that sounds like a really simple question because it's just make it simple, but there's a process behind that. Because when you have so much information, what's your process to get that out there in the world?
Yeah, I mean, it's going to sound ridiculous just from a logical perspective, but in a practical perspective, I don't think enough coaches do this. You've been in the industry for 20 years, so you'll understand this. I really learn how to make good content from coaching. And it might sound a little bit weird right now, but a lot of people ask me this. A lot of people say, don't you think the fitness industry is oversaturated with coaches? And a lot of people are surprised by my response. It's like, the fitness industry is oversaturated with people who call themselves coaches. It is undersaturated with people who are actually coaching, right? And so a lot of coaches say, well, I don't know how to make content. I don't know what content to make. If you spent 2 weeks coaching people on the floor of a gym, you would know there is an infinite amount of content to make. The number of questions that you're asked, the diversity of questions, the things that you see, the mistakes people are making, the insecurities. If you spend any time, even a brief period of time coaching people, you will very quickly learn that the amount of questions that people have are endless, and the amount of content you can make is endless. Now, that being said, one of the other things you'll learn is there's a theme to the questions that people ask. There are the most common questions, and then there are the least common questions. So if you go look through my content, you're going to find a very consistent theme with my content, which is my specialty lies in the most common questions that people ask, or the most common struggles that people have. So one of the most common struggles is motivation. Another of the most common struggles is consistency. Another really common struggle is how do you stay full while you're trying to lose body fat? Another common struggle is my back hurts when I'm deadlifting, right? So these are all very common. Now, out of those, I would say the least common of those, especially for general population, is back hurting when deadlifting, because so many people don't deadlift. They don't even know what a deadlift is. But among the crowd of people who do deadlift, that's a very common struggle. So make content around that. All of my content is really just me. It's what I've told my clients now expressed through social media. And that's really all it is. And as I've done it. I made my website in July of 2011. So I've been making content for almost a decade. So in the same way, I bet any coach who's been coaching for 3 years or more, if they looked back at the programs they had their clients do when they first started coaching, they would vomit. They'd be like, oh my God, what did I have them do? That was so dumb. It's like when I look back at my old content, I'm like, oh my God, I can't believe I actually hit publish on that because I thought it was good. But as a result of that, I've gotten better, and I now know how to break content down into very simple and easy to digest, and not only easy to digest, but sometimes fun to digest content that actually gets people engaged with it and helps them learn as well.
Yeah. And out of all that, I think the big standout for me there is it's about awareness. Like, and that's where the best coaches thrive, when they're aware. They're not so stuck in their lane that it's then just delivering the same thing in the same way, regardless of the reaction on the other end of it. And that could be coaching fitness exercises, it could be content, it could be anything, right? Like it's about widening your lens to the world and creating awareness of how the things that you're putting out there and how you're coaching, how those things are landing, understanding not everybody learns the same way, seeing what those issues are. And I mean, we could talk about how awareness improves everything for 3 hours, but it's all about that. And I think it stems from our mindset, whether we're talking fitness, whether we're talking life. And you touched on it a little bit earlier with religion. This is something where, I'm not a religious person at all, but I see where there is merit in lots of things in many religions that I hear about and that I build awareness around. One thing I struggle with is when it's the same thing. It's like blinkers to the world. And if you're not aware, how do you create and it sounds like you've done this, you've created a really smart view on the world, and it's helped you become a better coach and a better person by just being aware of what's out there. It doesn't mean we have to accept everything we hear. It doesn't mean we have to do everything we read in a book or in a religious text or whatever it is. It's just about being aware, absorbing the things that can help you show up as a better version of you every day. And I think that's a great message for everybody.
I agree. I love that you broke it down to that. I mean, I've been very lucky. I interned at a gym when I was 14 years old, all the way through high school. And then I trained at Westside Barbell. And then I trained at Cressy Sports Performance. And then I coached Gary Vaynerchuk. And, I've worked with some really remarkable people, some of the best in the industry, some of the best in the world. And I think a habit that I've taken from that is take what I like and leave what I don't. And I do that in as many areas as I can. I do that in strength and conditioning. I do that in nutrition. I do that with powerlifting. I do that with religion. I'll do that with philosophy. I'll do that with literally everything in life. I'll try to get the most that I possibly can, that I enjoy and that I think is morally and ethically sound, and leave what I don't. And that's for all things. It's not like religion is good or bad. It's not like deadlifting is good or bad. It's not like donuts are good or bad. There's no good or bad food. There's no good or bad exercise. It's how you use it. And when you can approach things from that perspective and take what you like and leave what you don't, well, now nothing is off limits and everything is now available to you to learn as a student.
Yeah, and what I just thought about is, funny enough, much like you mentioned the 10% facts thing earlier, when it popped in my head, is we just have to approach, the best way to put this, we have to approach life in a create, like you said, creating that awareness, widening that scope, taking everything and then leaving other stuff. And I think that what allows us to do is to move forward and create this non, I got it. So here, the quote that I hear all the time, this is going to summarize it perfectly. It just came to me that we hear stay in your lane.
Yep.
All the time. You know what? No, fuck that. Get out of your lane. That's the
Yeah.
biggest problem we've got. We're in our lane, and that's the issue. So that was great. I'm glad that came to me because I was trying to figure out a way. Well, I was going to make something original. However, I just stole something else. But so don't stay in your lane. Get out your lane. Whatever it is in life, and that doesn't mean that it changes your trajectory moving forward. You keep going in that direction, but take the blinkers off and see what's around you, because what it's going to do is it's going to carve out a slightly different path, and you're going to stay on that trajectory. And I think that aligns with, someone made this quote on a show recently that I recorded, and I can't quite remember who it was, but we're just talking about that same thing about how what people think and what other people do around you is we shouldn't not care what they think or how it affects them, because that's a little bit, I don't know, a bit narcissistic to believe that it's all about you and nothing about anyone else. However, take it in, be aware of it, but don't let it change your trajectory. And I love that, because it's not about not caring what others think. It's about absorbing it, taking what you like, accepting that not everyone's going to like you said, right? If you're worried about 2 people are going to unfollow you every time you write a post, you never write a post. Mm-hmm. You've got to say, okay, maybe they didn't like it because this and this, and maybe there's a few things you're going to change and maybe there's not, but you're still going to stay on that same trajectory. And I think that's such important for all of us. And I'm so glad I just learnt that via this conversation.
Yeah. It's funny. I was thinking, it's one of the things, obviously I'm American. I live in America. And one of the interesting things I've noticed about most Americans is, I don't know if I should say most. Yeah, I guess probably on a percentage basis, it probably is most. A tremendous amount of Americans have never been outside of America. They've never traveled to see another culture. I mean, now America's huge, right? And even within the United States, there are many different cultures within the United States. So you can go all over the country and experience a different culture. But it's one of the reasons why I'm just thinking about getting out of your lane. Get in a situation in which you don't know anybody, in which you don't know, like in which you are, I do jujitsu now. So I'm like, in which you're a white belt, right? In which you know literally nothing. Put yourself in a situation in which you are uncomfortable, in which you don't know anything. Maybe you don't know the language. Maybe you don't know what food to get. You don't know what the directions in the area. You have to ask someone for directions. Like, don't use your phone. Don't go on Google. Like, go ask somebody for directions. That's how I started learning Hebrew. I traveled to Israel when I was 18, and I learned how to say in Hebrew, how do I get to the bus station? And I would just go out in the city and I'd ask people over and over and over again, I knew where the bus station was. I knew the directions. I found it. But then I would listen and then I'd hear them give me directions. So I learned how to say like straight, take a right. That's how I learned the word traffic light in Hebrew, because they're like, you're going to hit the traffic light, then take a left. It's like, put yourself in a situation in which you know literally nothing, and you're forced to learn and soak it up. And you're going to, without question, encounter situations that you don't like. So you can just leave them for what they are. And at least you experience them. I'd rather you experience it and then be able to leave it than to never experience it at all.
Yeah, it's so true. I don't know how accurate and up to date this stat is, but just to back off what you were saying, apparently I read somewhere, and this is, take this how you want to take it. It's not a criticism for anyone listening, but 55%, I believe, of American population doesn't own a passport. So to kind of back up what you were saying, that's massive. That's more than half the country, right? So, and I'm sure that is very similar across the world. And I know it is for sure. Like in England, it's very similar. Like I grew up in England until I was about 25, and it was very similar. There's lots of people that are, well, why do I need to leave? Yeah, because you live on the tiniest little fucking island in the world. Not the tiniest, but one of them. And there's so much more out there. Like the reason you have such an issue with many, and this is not to say everybody, but people have issues with, the country and immigration and all the things that come with that when they live on an island. I'm like, well, maybe go out and see the world, and then maybe you'd understand it a bit more. And that, some people, that might resonate with some people, and if it doesn't, well, screw you. So whatever. Because I believe that's true. Like I came to live in Canada. I went to live in New Zealand. I traveled. I came back to Canada, and only did I open my perspective on the world when I did that. And the world and everything in it, not just different countries and different cultures, but everything. I realized that there's so much more out there, and unless we get out of our lane and realize that. So That's up. Yeah, there's your homework. If you're listening today, go out there and get out your lane. Um, Another thing I wanted to, I've got 1,000 things I want to talk about, but I've also got an hour, so I'm gonna choose wisely. I wanted to touch a little bit. You've mentioned quite a lot the influence that your mum had on you.
Mm.
And I'd love to hear, we talk about this a lot on our shows, relationships with our parents and how they kind of shape us and all the things that imprint on us as a kid. And it sounds like a lot of your, not to take away from everything you've done for your success, but a lot of that kind of early journey was based off of the way you were raised and the impact that your mum had on you. I wonder if you just share a little bit about that kind of relationship and, kind of how you see that.
Yeah, I mean, so my mom was a single working mother, right? So she raised two boys who were completely different in every imaginable way. Like we had different interests, we looked different, we thought different. We like my brother and I could not have been more opposite. And my mom was working full time, and she still managed to, take us to all of our sporting events or whatever our events were, go to our parent teacher conferences. And my mom, she's a powerhouse. My mom is intimidatingly smart. She's an unbelievable debater. She's like she's very good with debating. And I think it's sort of where I got it, because my mom, we would always get into arguments and debates. And thinking back, she probably did it on purpose. She probably played devil's advocate all the time just to get us to debate and to like work out that type of critical thinking, which is probably one of the best things that any parent could do or any teacher could do. Um, it's also probably one of the reasons I try and debate people all the time in the fitness industry. Like literally someone last night was like, I'd love to have the opportunity to debunk the calories in, calories out. And I was like, how about we do a public debate on my podcast? So I do that all the time. Um,
And how often did I take you up on it?
Very rarely. The first few times I offered, I actually got people to do it. And after I published those, very few people ever would do it after that. So I did like 2 or 3 public debates. They went very well in my favor. Published those podcasts. They got a great response from people listening, but then anyone who wanted to debate me wouldn't do it anymore. Um,
Love it.
anyway, she there's a lot to say about her, but I think one of the stories that I think is a great way to encapsulate her is when I was young, when I was very young, I think I was in like 4th or 5th grade, she lost her job. And what she would do is every morning she would take me to, like, I forget what it's called. It was something like before school. It was where like parents would bring their kids before school started. And it was still in school, but it was for parents who had to go to work early, or they couldn't take care of their kids at home and they had to get somewhere before school. So you would bring your kids to school wicked early. So she brought my brother and I there, and she would tell us that she was going to work. And we had no idea that she had lost. Only came out several years ago after like talking to her and learning more about her. Is what she would do is she would drop us off, then she would go to the public library and she would spend the entire day looking for jobs, applying to jobs. And this is like I think before Google existed, so however that worked, like she was doing that for a long period. And there was a period of time where she wasn't sure if we were going to lose the house, she wasn't sure if we were going to have to move. Like there was and I never ever remember her being openly concerned about it, her ever getting to a point where like she would put that stress on me. um and that's why I was so shocked when she told me about that, because I was like, I had no idea that was even an issue. And I think that just it's one of the things that I've tried to take with me, as well as almost like the stoic, right, who will try to bear a load of responsibility and provide for other people without putting their issues on top of you, which I think, for whatever it's worth, one of the things I've learned in therapy, it might not be a great strategy, right? And it might not always be the best strategy, in terms of, if you're always bearing the responsibility load without being able to express it to anybody, that could lead to serious anxiety, and it could lead to you thinking that people don't care. And so there's a limit to it. But I respect how much she kept to herself and how hard she worked and how she never let any negative circumstance prevent her from continuing to work hard.
Yeah. I don't think there's a better lesson. Like, it's so true. And maybe, and to your point, there's probably people that, maybe she did share that with, right? But it was keeping it away from where it needed to be, and it's much like the same, right? If I'm going to let my anxiety rub off on my 3-year-old because of the day I've had or whatever, right? Like she has to be mastering that, but that means I talk about it with my wife when she's gone to bed, right? Because she can understand it, she can rationalize, and she figures it out. But to take that frustration out, to take that anxiety out on someone who doesn't understand, or someone who is doesn't have the mental capability, and not to say that 3-year-olds aren't smart, because they're wicked smart, but when we're younger, we're not conceptualizing those things, right? So it's kind of deflecting it. Yeah. So I think that's such an important lesson for anyone listening who's got kids, and it's just a reminder for me that we have to show up as the best version of ourselves regardless of what we're going through. At the same time, find your outlet, whatever that looks like, right? And let's hope that that's a positive outlet for it, right? Someone to talk to. It's the people you surround yourself with, whatever it is. And yeah, that's a great. I love that. I just love that she was able to do that, because the difference that you make in so many people's lives, and the content and the coaching and and to back up what you said, the free stuff that's out there for people to learn is, as a result of that. And that's why it intrigued me as a question, because it just, having that kind of person influence you and give you that platform for life, for you how to take that and then apply it to everything you did, right? So the success, here's your foundation, and then you build your success from there. And it sounds like it was a really impactful one. I think work ethic is huge. It's a big thing I talk about with my dad. You're very emotionally, not great at expressing emotion. However, work ethic like no other, and that's what I learned from him, right? And it's all a balance. So I think that's an important message. And I just want to follow up, because I'm aware of time. I want to follow up now. We didn't speak a whole much about fitness, but here's why I didn't dig too much into that, because what I want the listeners to do is to go check out your social media page, because anything we could talk about right now, there's so much content out there that Jordan's put out there that you can look at. So go over, look up, I will put it in the show notes too, Syatt Fitness, and you can go over to syattfitness.com as well. But check him out on Instagram, because Jordan, your content's amazing. And all I have to say is, if you want to laugh, just go find the post about carrots to give yourself a chuckle, and then just hang around for the rest of the amazing content too, because carrots aren't the reason that you're not losing body fat, and that's all I'll say. But go have some fun with that. That's probably one of my favorite posts ever. Listen, I am so grateful. I know you are a busy man and you got lots going on, so I appreciate you finding some time to come on and share, a little bit of your story, and hopefully this is going to be a little different maybe than the fitness content that we typically put out there. But what it's going to do is it's really going to open up kind of who you are, the person behind the content, a little bit. And I think people will really appreciate that. And I've already had a few comments in when I posted that you were coming on the show today, so I think people will really love it. I obviously plugged your social media and your website, which I encourage people to look at. I'll put it in the show notes. And just over to you, if you got any final thoughts or anything else you wanted to put out there in the world.
No, man, this has been great. I really appreciate you having me on. I'm glad we didn't do much fitness, to be honest, just because I do that all the time. I do that all day, every day. And it was nice to have this type of an open discussion, and to create more of a connection with you and hopefully anyone listening on a more personal level. So I appreciate this. Make sure you send me this link when it's up, and I'll make sure to share it on my social media as well.
Yeah, really appreciate that. It'd be great support. And maybe there's a 10% Facts podcast or YouTube channel coming your way, maybe with the two of us in the future. All right, everyone, listen, thanks for tuning in today. Thanks for joining us. I really appreciate your support. Remember, head over, check us out on social media. You can find all the links in the show notes, as well as you'll find Jordan's links there too. And then just give us a subscribe. If you can, share an episode on social media, anything you can do to spread the conversation. That's how these platforms grow, and how podcasts get more and more traction, and how we can continue to make a difference around the world. So we really appreciate it. And remember, be the best possible version of yourself you can be. Keep making a difference. We'll catch you next episode.